Hello everyone, my name is John, I'm the Geeky Fanboy, and welcome back to Baker Street Reviews, cause Netflix released a new show called The Irregulars, which gained my attention pretty quickly as soon as the trailer came out. If you're not familiar with the term, the Irregulars are a bunch of street kids, street urchins in the original Sherlock Holmes stories who help Sherlock out by gathering information, since he thinks that these kids are able to go where he is unable to go and sort of infiltrate different parts of the city in order to gather information. So that's sort of their role within the canon. They don't appear in that many stories, but they have become quite popular within the larger Sherlock Holmes canon. Even like this great Sherlock Holmes Society in America is named after them, the Irregulars. So they do enjoy some popularity within the Sherlock Holmes fandom. What this show does, the Netflix show, is it marries the idea of the Sherlock Holmes universe with the supernatural. So we have these group of kids live on the street, working class, and they get called upon by Watson to investigate strange cases that have been going on in the city of London. And we soon get this idea, okay, this is not natural, it's more part of the supernatural, especially since also one of the kids has some kind of supernatural vision powers that have to do with what's going on in the city. And this show more or less sort of does an episodic thing, so we have different cases in almost each episode, but we also sort of get a overarching storyline that has to do with the family of one of with two of the kids in the group. But more or less we get sort of separate cases, and then everything is sort of tied up towards the end with a grand finale. Yes, we do also meet a couple of characters from the original canon. Naturally, we meet Holmes and Watson. We also get other characters like Mycroft, Lestrade. So we do meet a couple of people from the original canon, but mostly the story is, of course, focused on these kids. Now, I was admittedly a bit suspicious when I watched the trailer, because marrying the Sherlock Holmes canon universe with the supernatural is not always my favorite thing when it comes to Sherlock Holmes adaptations. I know it's actually quite a popular idea to sort of put Sherlock Holmes in a supernatural context, but for me personally, it's very often a hit or miss. So I'm not saying that it cannot be done in general. It can be done. Like I made a review a while ago on about a book that marries Sherlock Holmes with H.P. Lovecraft, and that book was quite entertaining. So I'm not saying that this is not a bad idea in and of itself. Just maybe if like me, you tend to be someone who likes or tends to enjoy the kind of Sherlock Holmes adaptations that stick very close to the original source material, then you need to get used to what you're going to see in this show. Also, what was a tease sort of in the trailer, and also by the statements the makers of the series have made, is that they wanted to introduce this idea of Sherlock not actually being that brilliant of a detective, or like that the kids are actually solving these cases and Sherlock Holmes takes credit for it. So this was sort of this idea that was flying around, and I was angry about that at first, because of course, why wouldn't I be? Come on. But that's not really a spoiler. They don't really do that. It's not like, and I'm going to talk about that a bit more later, it's not like Sherlock Holmes is like actively a huge part of the cases that are going on, or he like does a lot of detective work, and it's not like that these kids are actively doing these cases and then Sherlock goes to the police and says, here's the solution, now we take all the credit. It doesn't really happen, which is weird, because sort of the trailer and the statements from the maker of the show sort of definitely gave you this idea that this was what was going to happen, but that's not really the case. It's really just these kids getting involved in supernatural cases and they're a bit in over their head, and that's it. So I'm gonna stay away from spoilers as best I can. There might be a spoiler part towards the end of the review, but don't worry, I'll tell you about that beforehand. So for now, I'll tell you about my general thoughts on the show and the characters in as spoiler-free a way as possible. So in regards to the story, it's very mediocre. It's nothing new. It does absolutely nothing new. It's really just your standard supernatural stuff, and kids are getting involved. It sort of feels a bit like Stranger Things, but in Victorian London, which I know is sort of a weak comparison, I know, but to maybe sort of give you like a general idea of what this feels like. So you have different cases with different supernatural elements, but there really isn't anything new there. There aren't any sort of big surprises in regards to like these little cases. There are sort of like, not really sci-fi, but sort of fantasy-ish elements, also horror elements to a certain degree. Some people said that this show is quite gory, which I wouldn't necessarily say. Like, some of the cases are a little bit violent, but it's by no means anything extreme, if you ask me. The overall story is, you know, it's enjoyable enough, but it doesn't do anything unique. It's also very predictable. If you watch the first episode and then I would ask you to take a guess who's going to be the big baddie at the end of this story, you can probably take a good guess at who it's going to be after watching the first episode. The sort of overarching story we get has to do, so it sort of goes through multiple episodes, has to do with the family of these two siblings, of these two sisters that we follow, Jessie and B. So we sort of find or try to find out what their history is, especially in regards to their mother and all that. And naturally, I don't want to spoil too much. But again, no real big surprises there. I guess the only sort of surprise is that this obviously, as you can probably think for yourself, is entwined with the stories of Holmes and Watson, so we sort of get this crossover since they all sort of have to do with each other. I didn't really like where they were going with it. I might talk about that in the spoiler bit, but I didn't really like it, which also has to do with how they portray Holmes and Watson, which I also didn't really like, but we're going to come back to that as well. It did feel a bit cheesy here and there, sort of like, you know, with the power of friendship, we're all going to stick together, that sort of thing, that occasionally pops up throughout the show. We also get some romance stuff, which I did not care for. I should mention that in general, I'm not a big romance guy. I'm not into romance subplots in general. Here I was like, okay, I guess, yeah, that's happening. And there is even sort of like a love triangle going on. If you think about it, even sort of kind of two love triangles going on without spoiling it too much, but it's not as bad as I had feared it would be, since it's pretty clear from the very beginning who the girl wants to be with, and it doesn't really get and nothing is really explored with the other guy who has a crush on her. So in that regard, there is a love triangle, but it's not really that big of a thing. So that's good, even though the romance in general is, I mean, it's there. It's okay. It doesn't have to be there. But I guess, you know, this is a YA thing, so I guess we have to do romance. But at least it wasn't overly annoying or anything. So this brings me, of course, to the characters. The irregulars that we meet in this show are the two sisters, B and Jessie. And then we meet their friends Billy and Spike, and a new friend they make along the way is Leo, who is actually Prince Leopold, who is the youngest son of Queen Victoria. And how they get together is Leo basically sees B making a stand against the upper class, and he's really into that and basically falls in love with her right then and there, and then goes out and tries to find this group and tries to find B again. Then he gets involved in this whole storyline that's happening with the Irregulars, and they get called upon by Dr. Watson, who says, okay, here, there's this thing, and I've been sort of looking at what you're doing, and I need your help to help me solve this case. Which is also due to the fact that B's sister, Jessie, has supernatural powers herself. So the show actually opens with that. We see sort of these weird, strange visions Jessie has throughout the show. And a part of the storyline throughout the show is trying to find out what these visions actually mean and what kind of powers Jessie actually has. Now, before I go into any detail in regards to the characters, let me just say in general that I absolutely applaud the diversity of the cast in general in this show. We have a lot of different ethnicities represented in this show, which is always nice to see, naturally. And what I think a lot of people might also like about this is that it's not really treated as a big thing. I don't think race or racism or anything like that ever comes up as a topic for any of these characters. So, for example, Watson is played by a man of color. The leader of the Irregulars is an Asian English girl, and a bunch of other characters as well who are not white. And it's never addressed in the show. It's not like any kind of stereotypical racist character ever says something super mega racist, or it's not like Watson's integrity is ever questioned because he's black or something. That never happens, which I kind of appreciate to a certain degree. But I might come back to that when I talk about how the show represents, Victorian London and how it explores its setting, etc. But for now, the diversity, I think, is something that's very good about this show. So now let's talk about the characters. Let's talk about the Irregulars. So let's talk about my favorite in the Irregulars was the leader, B. B is very rough and tough. She definitely has these classic leadership characteristics about her. She takes no nonsense from no one. She literally has this big moment in the first episode where she talks to someone from the upper class and basically tells him, how dare you call yourself better than me just because you have some money, that kind of thing, which is a bit on the nose, but I kind of like it when she did that. And she always I just like how it feels that she's mostly in control, she knows what she's doing. And it's also never questioned, that's a girl that is a girl that's taking the lead. It's never questioned at all, which I think is great. And the show very much focuses on her, since it's especially also about her and her sister and the exploration of her family. And I think she has a great sort of emotional arc that goes throughout the show. She is at first very much perceived to be this hard-boiled, sort of tough person, but as the show goes on, we see that she also has a vulnerable side. She even has a romantic side. She gets the romantic subplot in the show as well with one of the other irregular kids. So I like that she is the most detailed character, definitely, we get with different kinds of facades that we see. And I also personally think, has some of the better character development throughout the show. Also, the actress, I think, does a very, very good job playing this character. And this is sort of where the problems begin, because B is the only one of these kids that I kind of cared about. Because she had way more details put into her characterization than any of these other kids. So for example, her sister Jessie, she's basically just the chosen one with the magical powers. That's all she does. She just has magical visions, keeps breathing heavily whenever she wakes up from a nightmare, and oh my god, what does it mean? That's all she does basically throughout the show, and she's there for sort of the emotional bonds she shares with her sister and the family history, that sort of thing. But there is much more to her. I don't know what her hobbies are. I don't know what she likes. I don't know what her personality is beyond I have superpowers and I'm not quite sure how to deal with them and I'm ever so slightly tortured because of it. I have no idea what else this girl does in this show. So, yeah, that's a problem. But at least it's sort of nice to see her whenever she's, in a scene with her sister, and we sort of explore their sisterly bond and their family relationships with each other. Even though sometimes Jessie has these freakouts on or against B, which I did not understand at all. Why she was pissy all of a sudden, and it's just like, oh, piss off, B! I don't want anything to do with you. Leave me alone. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, B is trying she's trying so hard to just treat her sister as best as she can to protect her. Like, she does literally everything for her sister. And sometimes she just gets super annoying for no reason. So let's move on to the boys in the band. First one, Billy. Billy is our token tough dude. At least that's what the show tells me. So, Billy has a crush on B. However, he's not the one who is involved with her romantically. He just has this unrequited crush on her, which is where we get the love triangle from. But the show sort of drops that after the first half of this first series. So we do get moments with where, he longingly looks at B and wishes he could be with her, that sort of thing, and he gets angry at the love interest, that sort of thing. They fight for no reason. And he leaves because he can't stand seeing her in a relationship with someone else, that sort of thing. But that's only really a problem in the first couple of episodes, and then it sort of dropped. He also sort of has kind of a subplot, but not really, in regards to his family's heritage, kind of where he comes from, since he's from kind of tries to find out, okay, who are my parents or how he grew up, that sort of thing. And we meet him in the first episode. He's a paid prize fighter, which is how the show tries to tell us this is the tough guy. He can throw some punches and is gonna kick so much butt. Which he then never does. Except once. Without spoiling it too much. And he's sort of the first character where I was wondering, why is he even here? It even gets said towards the second half of the show, like, this is her role in this group, this is my role in this group, and you're the tough guy, you're the muscle. And I'm like, I wanted him to show that he's the muscle. It would have been fun to sort of actually see him be more involved in actual fights, actual physical stuff, since that's sort of his thing. But no, he has an unrequited crush on B, and he sort of disappears from the group for a couple of episodes, and then sort of has his own thing and reunites, and I don't know. Yeah, wasn't really involved in his whole character or storyline that much, if I'm being honest. So the one he was angry with was the love interest. The love interest, so B's love interest, is Leo, aka Prince Leopold, who is Queen Victoria's youngest son. And I know I really shouldn't go on about historical inaccuracies, since, this is a supernatural Sherlock Holmes show based on fictional characters. But the history lover in me couldn't help but think this show is set in the 1880s, I think. Prince Leopold died at the age of 30 in 1884. And now I'm watching this boy who's 17 years old in this show set in the mid-1880s. Sure, why not? Let's go with it. So, he's our token rich kid, but he is sick, which is historically accurate. I think he has hemophilia or something. And he's cooped up at home at the palace all the time, and he just wants to go out and sort of be himself and live a different life, and he sort of fall in love with B and love at first sight and wants to go out and find her. By the way, he like leaves the palace and finds B within just like 2 or 3 hours in the city of London. How? Just how? Well, it doesn't matter. He finds her, sort of introduces himself as Leo, and he basically lies to the group. I think that the group sort of gets in the beginning that he's maybe some kind of rich kid or has some sort of more fortunate background, but naturally they don't know that he's from the royal family, and he also doesn't tell them, so there's sort of this discrepancy going on. And he gets involved with B over the course of the show, and yeah, it's fine. Like, I didn't really get why they like each other so much. I understood why he likes her, since she's sort of this romanticized version of a different life that he imagines he could have joining the street urchins, which is sort of where this romanticized idea comes from. I didn't really get why she's into him so much, but good for them. I mean, for the most part, the relationship is fine. It's kind of cute occasionally, even though they sometimes have moments of like quasi-semi breakups, or when they have fights for reasons where I was like, why is this suddenly an issue? Like, this is not really a spoiler, but like occasionally B like is really into him at one moment, and then immediately the next moment she is pissed off because he's being too mysterious about his background, because he's like, okay, now I can't stay, I have to leave because things. And it's not like, this is not what, like, they knew this, B knew this from the start going into this. And she gets pissed off about it at times where I'm like, you were fine with him being all mysterious and not being able to tell you why he can't stay with you literally 1 minute ago, but now you're pissed off. Just, why? So Leo's story is sort of about, discovering yourself and breaking out of this role he's been assigned to since birth. And I don't care because he's a royal rich kid, and I just can't feel bad about the fact that, oh no, he has to go back home to the palace and be with rich royal people that he can't stand because they want to marry him and all look so nice. Like, I get what the show is going for. I definitely get what the show is going for with his character. But, it's sort of hard to feel really bad about that, or, to have so much empathy for this guy who has to give up life at the freaking Buckingham Palace. I just can't. I can't feel bad. Why should I feel bad about that? And again, he sort of is like, why are you here? He's here for the love interest. That's why he's here. He's here to be the love interest, and he's sort of a bit like the smart guy, which is good. But then again, he also, for the most part, I'm wondering why he's even in the story other than being the love interest for our main character. And now comes the worst offender of the case of me wondering why are you even here and in this story, Spike. Spike is sort of the comic relief character in this show. There's not a whole lot of humor in this show at all, but he's sort of like, the nice comedic, smooth talking kind of guy. And I have no idea why he's in this. I feel like he does absolutely nothing that's relevant to the plot of this series. He's sort of portrayed as being like the glue, the skeleton that keeps the group together. Kinda, but honestly, in my opinion, he didn't have enough moments that prove that to me. He is sort of apparently kind of in love with Jessie, even though that's not really that clear. And you're wondering where did that come from? Well, it's there, it's not really getting explored at all. But sure, why not? And I was just, at the end of the show, I was like, why, what did he contribute to the plot of this show that made him relevant? Like, you know, characters should always be important. Like, if you cut out a character, something about the plot has to change. So the character has to have a significant impact on the plot for make the plot happening in that way. I feel like if you cut Spike out, not a whole lot would change, if even anything. And I like the actor who played him. He's doing a very fine job, and he's and the character is very likable, definitely. And I would maybe actually be interested in seeing a sort of romance storyline between Spike and Jesse in a second season. But for the most part, I was wondering why he is even here. Okay, so now let's talk about the Sherlock Holmes characters. Which characters do we get from the canon and how are they characterized? So, basically everyone who's from the original canon sucks now. Like, Mycroft has an appearance in one episode. Mycroft is a wimp. Mrs. Hudson, she's an old crone who now swears a lot. Watson is an impolite, entitled wanker who's angry all the time. And Sherlock, which I should mention, doesn't make an appearance until halfway through the first season, is just no. That's not my Sherlock Holmes. We're gonna talk about that. So yeah, everyone who you kind of know and love from the original canon sucks now and is now an asshole in one way or another. Let's talk about Watson, since he is the one canon character that we see most of the time, and he's the one who engages the irregulars. Why is he so unlikable? You know, Watson is supposed to be the down-to-earth, likable, helpful, loyal friend who, you know, helps out Sherlock whenever he can, tries to help people who need help whenever he can. You know, he's a doctor, he's very loyal and dedicated to his job. This series seems to have completely forgotten that Dr. Watson is a doctor. Let Watson do some doctoring, please. I hate that when adaptations completely ignore the fact that Watson has like a medical degree and is actually like super educated and shit. He doesn't do anything like that. There is a scene in this series where one of the irregulars get like, she's super unconscious and looks evidently not fine and is like brought into Baker Street and put on the couch, and Watson just stands there. He's just standing brooding at the window. No interest in a sick girl whatsoever. Nothing. And this happens all the time. So I'm like, this man is a certified doctor. He's been practicing for like, I don't know, 20 years. Shouldn't he do something? Nope. This Watson has no dedication to being a doctor whatsoever. But he does have a dedication to being a bit of a twat. So he's very impolite and angry all the time, especially towards the kids, and he's kind of sinister at times as well, where you're like, this Watson is definitely not as approachable as the one you know from the books. He's really not. He's really not. It all sort of has to do with his friendship his relationship towards Sherlock, which does get explored throughout the second half of the series, which I don't really want to say too much about because spoilers. He does get a bit better towards the second half of the series. I think as some of his motivations as a character are revealed, and you sort of understand him a bit better towards the second half of the series. But how do you make one of the... No, most likable, easiest to write companion literature characters. How do you ruin that? How do you... I'm not saying you can't do hard-boiled. Obviously you can do hard-boiled and someone who's a bit more rough and tough. And, you know, you can see elements of that in both, I don't know, like Martin Freeman's version of Watson and also in Jude Law's version of Watson. I get this a bit more like fisticuffs sort of thing. But they're still likable. You get, you know, why they're the most loyal friend ever, and why they are dedicated doctor and all that sort of stuff, but you don't really get that from the Watson in this show. Which brings me to Sherlock. The thing is, I can't say too much about Sherlock in the spoiler-free part, since his storyline very much gets revealed towards the second half of the series. But you know, Sherlock he's very much not the detective you know from the books. He doesn't really do any detective work whatsoever. He's basically broken. He's absolutely broken and completely lost in his drug addiction in this show. For reasons I cannot tell you because spoilers, so I guess you have to watch the spoiler part if you really want to know. But I did not like the portrayal of Sherlock Holmes in this at all. I don't mind the idea of portraying Sherlock Holmes in a sort of a more quote-unquote controversial way. You know, you focus on his drug addiction, which is something I always welcome because I think that's a very interesting part of his character. But you know, we occasionally get flashbacks when he was younger and sort of working as a detective with Watson and all that. And basically, Sherlock is like a flashy hipster. Granted, I do like the longer hair he has in the flashbacks. That looks kind of cool on him. But he his outfits were so widely irritating. Where I was like, yeah, he was different and very much a bohemian, but he always dressed immaculately. Like everything was messy around him, but Sherlock's appearance is very much clean. But no, you take one look at this Sherlock in this series and you're like, he's a Victorian hipster, basically. It's hard to complain about him when you can't reveal the spoilers, so I'm gonna get more into that in a couple of minutes. But, yeah, no, they give him storylines where you're thinking, this has nothing to do with anything the original Sherlock Holmes did in the canon, nothing whatsoever. They outright change or do things where I thought, how did anyone read these books? Did anyone take a look at the original character? And if they did, how did you go from these beautiful novels and characterization of this great detective to this? So the thing is, I don't necessarily mind Sherlock Holmes portraying him in a sort of different light where you're saying, okay, he's not actually that great. And I actually sort of appreciate this idea of deconstructing this myth of the great man, of the great detective, since this is sort of what the show tries to do, is sort of deconstructing this idea of the myth, which I think is a neat idea. For example, what's it called? Without a Clue. Without a Clue is, for example, a very good concept where Sherlock Holmes isn't actually Sherlock Holmes. And this whole idea of his character is literally deconstructed because it was constructed by fiction. Like, that's cool. I like that. That's funny. But in this regard, I thought they strayed far too much away from the original canon and or the original characterization, where you're thinking this doesn't have to be Sherlock. Why even is this Sherlock Holmes? Why even is this Watson? Which brings me to my next part, the exploration or the world building of not only the Sherlock Holmes canon, but also Victorian England. Okay, so let's talk about Victorian London and the setting, because at the end of the day, I couldn't help but wonder, why does this have to be set in Victorian times? Is it purely because this is Sherlock Holmes based? But even so, you could have easily just made this any other setting, like a modern day setting. Well, I don't know. Since I was hoping that this series would explore more elements of the Victorian society. Since, you have this perfect opportunity with these kids, with these street kids, with these working class kids, to explore working class problems in Victorian England, how child labour was a huge problem. Like, these kids mentioned so many times the workhouse was so bad. We never see them working at the workhouse. We are only told the workhouse is so bad. Which is a general problem. This show has a tendency to tell you much more than it shows you, which is one of these examples. Like, show us the kids working. Show us how horrible it could be for these working class kids to having to take a job, a child labour job that were utterly horrendous back in Victorian times. You could have used this to show how Victorian society, how the class system worked and actively worked against these kinds of people, especially against children. And you could contrast this with Leo's character, who's like from the royal frickin' family. But no, that never happens. We only really see these kids hang out in their dingy cellar flat, which, yeah, granted, doesn't look nice. And, when you see sort of see the people they hang out with, they look rough and tough and poor. But, like, that's it. We don't really get any exploration of that. Sure, we get B in this very first episode berating this upperclassman and being like, "How dare you call yourself my better just because you have money?" That's basically all we get. And this is why I come back to that I, to a certain degree, like that the diversity in this show is not addressed at all. It's just there. But then on the other hand, you maybe could have used that to explore stuff even more in Victorian times. I don't want to dive too much into that, since I'm by no means an expert on, the representation of race or racism in media, but by no means I don't want to oppose anything. I'm just saying that this could have been something they could have done. I can very much see how people are saying it's great that the diversity doesn't get addressed, it's just there. But then I would also understand why some people say you could do something with that. Have people explore the fact that Watson is a man of colour, but he was still able to get a degree as a doctor and is now a respected person in Victorian society. Or, how the Victorians' social class system actively discriminated not only against kids and poor people, but even more so against people who were not white, since we have 2 non-white kids in the irregulars. So maybe you could have explored that a bit more, just as an idea. It doesn't need to be there by no means, but I just wished in general that there would have been more exploration of the actual Victorian setting. Show me how bad it could be for the working class. Show me what Victorian working class was actually like. And I don't think the show really does that. It tells you a lot about it, how bad it is, but it doesn't show you. In general, like I said, there is a show don't tell problem, especially like towards the second half of the series, when the supernatural stuff, as you can imagine, goes absolutely haywire, and they keep telling you, "Oh no, the city is sinking into utter chaos and everyone's going wild in the streets." You don't see any of that. Everyone always tells you that everything is absolute chaos. But what do you see? You hear some screaming maybe sometimes when, like, outside the window, basically. You see someone getting run over with a carriage, and you see someone attacking someone. But you never actually get to see, like, this huge chaos the city is apparently falling into due to this supernatural stuff spreading in the city. You don't really see that, which kind of takes away then from the dramatic ending when they're trying to tell, oh no, this supernatural stuff could destroy the entirety of London and or even the British Empire, that sort of thing. And you're like, I don't know. I haven't seen chaos taking place. Yeah, you have seen like these. You have seen these very separate cases that these kids explore, where you get these individual people who are involved in the supernatural and do bad things. But these are only like the individual cases that the kids work on, but we don't see how it actually, or not enough, how it spreads throughout the city. And yet everyone tells you at the beginning of the episode, oh no, London is absolutely chaotic and is falling. And you're like, I don't know. I haven't seen chaos in the streets since no one shows me, but everyone tells me, so I guess bad things are happening. The worst case of this is not really a spoiler. In the last episode, and there's sort of a moment where some of the irregulars are fighting off some of the supernatural possessed zombie people, or I don't know, but you never actually see them. Not really. You have them picking out weapons and everything. They're like preparing, and they keep looking at the door, and you always hear the door like rattling, and you're waiting for shit to go down, and it never happens. You only hear the rattling of the door and like growls from outside, but that's it. You never actually get to see any of that, or the fighting or anything, and you're like, come on, give me something. Okay, because I'm already in such a mood, I'm gonna complain a bit more, but in order to do that, I have to go into spoiler territory. So here is your spoiler warning in case you don't want to hear any spoilers. But yeah, I'm gonna complain some more about in regards to some of the Sherlock Holmes characters and what happens to them. So if you don't want to know about that, switch the video off now. Okay, so let's talk about my boy Sherlock Holmes. What the hell? What the hell is it with that straight, sad romance nonsense my man gets involved in? What the fuck even is that? Like, okay. So, basically, what this all boils down to, Sherlock Holmes is so messed up and has all of his drug problems because a couple of years ago, well, like 16 years ago, and we need to talk about the age gap thing, aging problems anyway. Sherlock and John got involved in like case solving, and they got involved in the supernatural, and they tried to find someone who's an expert on it, which is where they find Alice, who is actually the mum of Bea and Jessie. She gets sort of hired by these guys. Then we have sort of a time skip, and apparently Sherlock Holmes has somehow fallen in love with this woman now. It's not explained why, how this relationship has formed. We just suddenly get these moments where they're close together and they express how much they like each other and don't want to get hurt and that sort of thing. And then they smooch and what's the season and they're all jealous. We're going to come back to that. And then Sherlock is like head over heels romantically involved with this woman, gets engaged to her. They have a baby. Jessie is that child. Jessie is Sherlock's daughter. And I was like, fuck off. No, piss off with that nonsense. And then, Sherlock gets this super dramatic trauma background story because, Alice died sacrificing herself because supernatural nonsense. And he's so broken because of it. And then at the very end, Alice sort of comes back through supernatural means, but then has to go again. And and Holmes turns around to Watson and says, "You've always been the best of friends. Bye," and runs into death and sacrifices himself so he can be with this random woman. What the fuck? What the fuck? How? I was like, how dare you? How dare you make one of the best, the most loyal, one of the most famous, popular, best friendships in literature, in the whole of fiction, completely meaningless by having Holmes falling in love with this random woman and run off into death with her so he can be at her side and leave Watson completely out of the picture. Holmes leaves Watson for a woman and is dead. And you're like, yeah, this is clearly how I want the most famous and loyal friendship in literature represented. Naturally, this is exactly what I wanted. This is also exactly what I want from my asexual, aromantic coded character to be romantically involved in the most cliched, emotional, tragic love story with a random woman, which the show doesn't even bother telling us how they fell in love with each other and then they have kids and oh God, it was so bad. I can't even express how disappointed I was. And just as a side note, how old are these characters supposed to be? Like, they make jokes, oh, Holmes and Watson are so old now. Like, the kids are supposed to be like 16, 17 years old. So Sherlock fathered Jesse 16 years ago, 15 years ago, something like that. How old are they supposed to be now? 45? Because they don't look 45. I looked up the actors, they're in their early 30s. And we get like these flashbacks when Sherlock first, gets involved with Alice. Like, when was this supposed to be? Like 15, 16 years ago. How old was Sherlock and John supposed to be? They look like they haven't aged a day, and it's super irritating. Okay, and something else that I think we should mention is that in this version, Watson is canonically in love with Sherlock. So there is this whole problem of, Watson, Sherlock, and Alice, so the mom, having tried to solve these supernatural cases before, and then Alice died because Watson didn't help her, but tried to save Sherlock instead. So that's why Alice died. And naturally, B is wondering about that and like keeps pressuring Watson on why he didn't save her mother. And then Watson admits that he loves Sherlock and he always did everything for him and he cares about him. And even now that Sherlock is so broken, he's still there and still looks out for him. Which, I thought was a cute idea. Also, I can totally see Tumblr being all over that. So I'm someone who does not ship Holmes and Watson because to me, Holmes and Watson has always been like the epitome of the perfect friendship. That's like this is the gold standard for friendship. That's Holmes and Watson to me, which is why I've always sort of refrained from shipping them. But it's fine if you ship them. I can totally see why. I can totally see why people are into that. I definitely get that. Which is why I don't really mind that Watson says he's in love with Sherlock. You can take that in a bunch of different ways. Naturally, it's meant to be read in a romantic way, since you sort of see him being jealous when he sees Holmes and Alice kiss, which is where we sort of get a second love triangle. Like, you can definitely sense Watson being jealous whenever the relationship between Alice and Holmes comes up, or he sees them sort of involved with each other. But it very much taps into this sense of loyalty that Sherlock and Watson have, especially Watson has for Sherlock, that we also see in the books. So I don't mind that, and I think it's sort of neat to have, I guess, a more modern adaptation that actually like outright just says that, instead of just either having fun with saying, look, it could be gay, but it isn't, or sort of teasing it, but never actually saying it, which some people have, of course, seen in some other adaptations over the years. So it's sort of nice to have this adaptation where Watson straight up says, because I love him. So I don't mind that. I think that's cute. Now, it's kind of stupid that he admits that to B, who has been pressuring him on this answer for some time. And then he says, because I love him, because I've always loved him. And then she just turns around and says, oh, you're so cold, you could never love anyone. And I'm like, yeah, great. That's great to tell this man, this Victorian man in the 19th century, who has just admitted to you that he's in love with another man, to tell him you could never love anyone because you're so cold-hearted. Yeah, that's definitely helpful. That's very much helpful for this probably insecure gay man in Victorian times. Yeah, that's sure helpful. Also, it doesn't help that Sherlock dies at the end of this, and he dies for this random woman he's apparently been in love with, and basically just tells Watson, "You have been a very good friend, Watson. Bye," and then dies. Well, and at the end, Watson is just sort of hanging out on Baker Street and is sad that his best friend and the man he loved died. And again, at the end, he sort of says, "Well, what will I do now? I'll find something to occupy myself with." I'm like, you're a freaking doctor. You actually work as an active physician in the book. Why does this adaptation keep forgetting that this man is a practicing doctor? But enough of that. Okay, so this is it for this long and rambly and sort of ranty review. It's by no means a very bad show. It's by no means a very fantastic show either. It's meh. It's mediocre, if you ask me. This show doesn't do anything new. It doesn't do anything new in general when it comes to these sort of YA adventure type shows. It maybe does a couple of things, tries to do a couple of things, new things with the Sherlock Holmes characters. It doesn't do it successfully or entertainingly, if you ask me, but at least they sort of kind of try it, I guess. I don't know. But again, I was sort of wondering why does this have to be? I wanted more exploration of the actual, basis, the Victorian setting and all that, and the Sherlock Holmes canon. This could have all just been evolved a bit more. The storyline is nothing to write home about. It's very much episodic to a certain degree, with cases that are more or less interesting. It's very much your standard supernatural, slightly horror-ish, spooky stuff. The acting is good. The acting is decent all across the board. The editing is fine. The music is irritating, especially in the first half, since it sort of does this modern music but old-fashioned setting sort of thing, but not with the kind of modern music you expect. It's very, very irritating, modern techno rap music, which just doesn't go well. But the series sort of abandons that in the second half of the series, which is weird. But yeah, that's maybe something you'll have to see for yourself if you like that. Production is fine, editing is okay, it looks decent enough, it does everything decent enough. And, if you absolutely love the show, good for you. Good for you. It's absolutely fine. As a Sherlock Holmes fan, go into this not expecting a Sherlock Holmes show. This is not a Sherlock Holmes show. It does have Sherlock Holmes characters in it, but they are not the main focus, and you're not getting your classic Holmesian deduction investigation shtick. You're not getting that. So maybe think about that going into the show. I thought it was okay. I admittedly binge watched the whole thing. It's very easy to sort of binge through. It's also very good to sort of have on in the background while you're doing some other stuff. I would probably watch a second season if there was one at some point, since I do think these characters have a lot of potential. And I think the basic idea of, exploring Victorian London through the eyes of these working class kids could be more detailed in a second season. So I would be interested in seeing what happens. But for now, if I had to give it a score, I would give it a 6 out of 10. which means it's okay. You can give it a watch if you're interested. Don't expect anything like special or unique maybe, but you know, it's a nice weekend watch sort of thing. So yeah, so that's my opinion on The Irregulars. Do tell me down in the comments below what you thought of the show and of the different characterization, especially of Holmes and Watson. And yeah, don't forget to like and especially subscribe if you haven't done it already. And I'll see all of you next time. Goodbye.